Your source for everything paranormal. Parax.
Throughout the ages, history has been altered by word of mouth and the misrepresentation of those who might not have been present when some of the world's most significant events took place. Channelers Barry and Connie Strohm bring through the spirits of those who actually witnessed or took part in these historical events and lets them tell their stories in their own words. Welcome to Channeling History. And now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Channeling History. You should know by now that we're the only show where all of our guests are on the other side of the life veil, and we're brought to you on the Parax Radio Network. I'm Barry Strohm, your host, and I'll be doing the channeling of our spirit guest tonight.
And I would also like to thank you for tuning into our show this evening. I'm Connie Strohm, your co-host, and I will be asking the questions of our spirit guest tonight, Bob Hope, who was one of the most famous comedians of all times. He's probably best known for entertaining the troops during the wartime, but he was also quite the philanthropist. We think Channeling History is a very unique show that brings you very useful information. So please tell your friends about us so we can continue to grow our audience.
We always try to do a small disclaimer because you never know in advance what our spirit guest is going to say. So the opinions or statements voiced on our show are the channeled words of the spirits, do not necessarily reflect our opinions, those of the Parax Network or our sponsors.
All of our shows are available on our YouTube channel in the name of Barry Strohm, or if you would like to download them, go to Podomatic.com and just search Channeling History.
At the current time, we're doing two other podcasts. A weekly message from Jesus, in which we bring a message of faith and inspiration, can be heard on Wednesday mornings on our YouTube channel. On Sunday mornings, we do a podcast named Eternity Speaks with Reverend Bill Eggleston, where we channel a message from a Holy Spirit. This morning, we had John the Baptist on, and he gave a great message.
When we begin our channeling tonight, I will ask the questions as usual, and Barry, as usual, will answer the questions in the words of the spirits.
But before we channel, we always say a prayer of protection. So Connie's now going to say the prayer, and we'll get on with our guest, Bob Hope.
God, please grant us your wisdom and protection. Grant us the knowledge that we can handle and keep us safe from all things that will harm us. Keep the messages positive and pure love. Keep us safe from our egos. We ask these things in the light of the seen, the unseen, and the honesty of God. Amen. Bob, thank you so much for coming here this evening. I always enjoyed your sense of humor. Would you like to begin with a message?
Yes, I believe I would. It's been a bit since I've been able to talk to the people. I always enjoyed the entertainment industry. I loved going to entertain the troops. They were such wonderful individuals. I did it as many times as I could. I would try to take people with me to entertain them. They deserve all of the praise. They deserve all the honor. They deserve everybody to be praying for them. I made a living entertaining people. I made them laugh. Sometimes they didn't laugh so much, and sometimes I had crappy jokes. But I enjoyed being on a stage in front of the people. They were wonderful. I was very lucky. My life encompassed the 1920s, where we had silent pictures, we had radio, and we had vaudeville. I learned that I really wanted to be part of the business by doing vaudeville. Then there was radio came along and destroyed vaudeville. And then the karma of television came along and destroyed radio. So I tried to participate in everything. I did movies. I had great friends. I knew great people. And I lived in the golden age. It was a time that was very, very different from what you see today. today you see computers doing the acting. In my time, we had to actually stand up there and say the words ourselves. I guess if this continues, there's going to be a time there won't even be actors. Just boy and girl computers talking to each other. So anyway, thank you for allowing me to come through tonight. I do truly appreciate it.
Okay, could you tell us about your family?
My father was a stonemason. I was actually born in England.
Hmm.
He was much better at making children than he was at cutting stones. So we had a big family. There were 7 of us. He found out that he couldn't make a living in England, so he decided that he would bring us all to the United States. So at 4 years old, we arrived at Ellis Island, moved on to Ohio, and I guess he found out that he wasn't any better cutting stones in Ohio than he was in England. I knew that I had to get out of the house. I knew that there were other things I wanted to do. I actually did anything I could. I would take odd jobs. I would try singing in the streets. I would do a lot of different things. And all in all, I was actually quite lucky.
Yeah, we read that at the age of 12, you began your career as a street performer. Tell us how that affected your life.
I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it much when people wouldn't put any money in my hat, but I got a real taste of being able to sing, dance a little bit. Wasn't real good at playing instruments, but I pretended. I felt that this was something that I really, really wanted to do, but when you're living in Ohio, you're pretty far from the big stages. I would take different jobs and did what I had to do to support myself.
Okay, in 1921, while you were working for a power company clearing company, you were involved in an accident where your face was crushed and you had reconstructive surgery. How did that affect your appearance?
Well, you're wondering how I got a nose that looked like this? Now you know. I think I pissed off the doctor because he made my nose look like a ski jump. But some things you don't worry about in life. I found that it was actually made me a bit distinctive. Where else did you see a nose like I had? I was very lucky. I'm joking about it, but he really did a pretty good job. It was a very serious injury, and it could have had major repercussions, especially for someone like myself that wanted to go into the entertainment industry.
Well, how did your career as a boxer work out for you?
Oh, sorry, I was afraid you were going to ask that question. I was very light in those days, so I decided maybe I could be a boxer. I don't know what got into my head. I found out that the other guys were a lot better than I was, and I really didn't want them beaten up on my nose, so I decided that boxing was not actually what I really needed to do for a career.
I think that was a good decision. How did you make the change from boxer to vaudeville comedian and dancer?
It dawned on me that all the good-looking women were doing vaudeville at the time. And I figured if that's where they are, it's good enough for me. I did have certain talents. I could dance a little bit, I could sing a little bit, and I could tell jokes a lot better than I sang and danced. It was a time where there were a lot of different troupes in vaudeville. Keep in mind that in those days, people couldn't travel to the big cities in order to watch Broadway or go to California or any of the areas where the top entertainment people were living. Vaudeville was basically small traveling troupes. They went from town to town. Most towns would have small theaters, and we would come out on the stage and we'd tell jokes, do a little slapstick, do a lot of things that you sure can't do on the stage today. It was the way of entertainment in the 20s.
Yeah,
Things were great in the 20s. It was prosperity. Everybody was laughing. And then 29 came and everybody stopped laughing. We still tried to do the best we could. The Depression really, really hurt a lot of good people. We tried to make them laugh in the 30s. That was about all we could do. It was it was a terrible time economically. We never made too much money in those days, but vaudeville was wonderful. Met a lot of great people. It was a real fun time.
Bob, what do you think of stand-up comedy today?
I think it's a very, very difficult way to make a living. In my day, we could pretty much say anything we wanted to. We could pick on people. We could be a little off color. There really weren't any rules to what we could do in stand-up. We could pick a person and pick on them. Today, your culture is much different. There are guidelines that I think the comedians of today are afraid to cross. There are things that we can't say about people that we could say then. We were never trying to be hurtful. We were just simply trying to be funny. Today, people take people trying to be funny and tell them they're being hurtful. Everything's upside down in your world. As I sit over here and watch, I'm glad I'm not trying to do stand-up.
During your career, how much did you depend on writers to come up with your jokes?
Well, in the beginning, I couldn't afford anyone, so I had to depend on myself, and maybe my jokes weren't as funny then. As I became more well-known, I hired many people to write jokes for me. I actually depended quite a bit on them. There were times that I had many, many people working for me just simply trying to make me look funny. I think the most I ever had was 12 or 13. I know when I say that, that seems like an awful lot of people writing jokes. But there's only a small percentage of jokes that are written that are really funny. There's nothing worse when you stand up in front of a crowd and you start to tell a joke and it ends and nobody laughs. That's the part of stand-up comedy that really isn't funny.
That would scare me away from it. Tell us about Bing Crosby.
I met Bing pretty early in our career in the movies. We did a bunch of movies together. They were called road movies, Road to Mandalay, titles like that. Forget how many there actually were. Bing was what they called a crooner. He had this style of singing, a very velvety voice, and we really hit it off on the screen. Now, Bing and I'm trying to be polite here. Bing and I had different personalities. We could mesh together in the movies, but we really never got together too much socially. He had a way of looking at things, and I did as well. I pushed very hard. The last thing I ever wanted to do was to go back to living like I did with my brothers. Bing had a bit of success before I'd met him. We both prospered from our relationship. We got along, we invested together, but I would never say that we were best buddies.
You hosted the Academy Awards 19 times. What was it like being passed over for an award each year?
It kind of sucked. I was doing my best in the movies, and I guess the Academy didn't think too much of me. They thought more of me as an MC than they did as a person appearing in the movies. each year I'd get up there and I'd hand these little gold things out to people. I did notice that they seemed to get smaller in the year. I guess that was the Academy getting more cheap, but I don't know. I would make jokes about it. And I think people came to look forward to the jokes that I would make about the Academy. I will say this. In all the awards I was at, nobody ever hit me. I guess that was an improvement over what's taking place now. I guess being an ex-boxer, maybe I'd have hit him back. But no, the Academy Awards are a very strange animal. If you think your political systems are rough, you ought to see it when the board of the Academy gets together.
One of our listeners has a question for you, Bob. Who made you laugh the most?
I was honored to know so many of the greats. Jack Benny was incredible. When he was on the stage, he owned the stage. Burns was wonderful. It would be really hard just to pick one person. I used to love to be with Johnny Carson. I could make him break up, but he couldn't even talk on his show. As I said, I was so blessed to know all of these incredible, great talents. It would be hard for me to pick one that really made me laugh the most.
You had a very successful radio career. What did you think when television began to become popular?
Thought I better get my ass out of radio. I'd seen vaudeville be killed by radio. I understood that even though television didn't look like much in the beginning, it had a great potential to reach everybody. I started to try to get involved with television shows. And luckily my contract with NBC allowed me to do that. Television was really what I think brought me the most success. NBC started to televise my Christmas shows that I would always do with the troops, and they always rated very high when they ran those shows in January. Television, I knew it was going to be a big deal. Now, I'm wondering what is going to replace television, because I'm sure something will. Maybe there'll be a time that everything's a hologram, and they'll send these figures running through your front door, light figures. I don't know. I do know that things change. I do know that something will replace television in the future. Thank goodness I don't have to be there to make the transition.
In 1941, you made your first USO appearance for the troops. During the next 50 years, you made 57 tours for the troops from World War II to the Persian Gulf War in 1990 and 91. What made you do so much for the troops? And thank you for that, by the way.
I loved the troops. I was a fairly conservative guy. I fully realized that our future laid in the hands of those boys during World War II. I'd just been a child. I was young during World War I, and I didn't really appreciate the suffering. By the time the Second World War came along, I totally understood that it was going to be a massive endeavor. Hitler was in Europe. He had conquered most of the continent, had his eyes on Britain. Our boys were fighting in the Pacific. The Japanese were incredibly brutal at the time. I knew they were going through hell, and I just felt that I had to do something for them. I tried my best. I went into places I tried to entertain them, and I tried to make them laugh. I knew if they could laugh for an hour, maybe it would be much easier for them when they went into the hell that they were going to face in the next week.
You're absolutely right about that. They say laughter is the best medicine. Were you ever in any danger during any of the USO tours?
Yeah, we almost stumbled into a Nazi attack one time. There were times that we were trying to land on foggy runways, damaged runways. In those days, when you traveled to entertain the troops, you were going into dangerous areas. We were very lucky. We never had any of our people injured, and we were never involved in any direct conflict. But just flying in those early planes was danger enough.
I can see that. You were offered a lieutenant commander position during World War II. Why did you not take it?
Actually, I would have taken it, but the president intervened. He said that I was doing too much good for the troops, entertaining them, and that I would be of a much greater service to our country to just continue doing what I was doing. So he's really the one to put the kibosh on the lieutenant commander position, and I know now that he was truly correct.
Could you tell us about Frank Sinatra?
Frank was a piece of work. He was very, very talented. He would do many things, had a good sense of humor. People loved him. He was just a great performer. Frank, I still see him over here. We still laugh a lot over here. We did a lot of things that we probably shouldn't talk about. But he's a good guy, good soul. You guys ought to talk to him sometime.
We just might do that. The Vietnam War became very unpopular. What was it like performing during that war?
It was actually quite difficult. Many of the performers were very upset about the war and wouldn't join me to go celebrate the troops. The people were taking it out on the soldiers. They were just following orders. It was the people in charge that were making the decisions that were making the war so unpopular. I watched what was going on. I didn't agree with a lot of the decision making. It seemed like they weren't fighting to win. Everybody was afraid of China coming in, like they'd done in Korea. It's very difficult when our boys are sent to fight a war that the officers make unwinnable. I knew that those guys that were fighting over in Nam needed as much laughter as they could find, because what they were going through was absolutely no joke. I did find a few people that would go with me. I think Ann Margaret was one, but it was a very difficult time. And then when I would come back from one of my trips with the soldiers, it wasn't unusual that I'd hear booing in the crowd. People were very unreasonable, I thought. I was just trying to do my best. I wasn't making the decisions to fight the war. I was just trying to help the guys. It broke my heart when the soldiers came back from Vietnam and they were treated like animals. People would spit on them. They would throw things at them. It was a terrible time for our country. I would have hoped that our leaders learned during that war, but I'm afraid there are times that they are very forgetful.
Okay, as much time as you spent with these gentlemen, one of our listeners would like to know if you ever suffered from any PTSD.
It was very difficult for me. In those days, we didn't recognize it as PTSD. Some of the hardest things that I did was going through the hospitals and talking to these terribly wounded boys, and they were just boys. I would see them. I would see them suffering. I would see them light up when we came through, and they would laugh in spite of all the pain they were going through. There were times when I came back that I would see the faces of those guys. I would dream about them, and there were times that I couldn't sleep because of what I saw. I guess you would consider that PTSD. I wasn't really sure what it was.
Yeah. Let's go to something a little more fun. Tell us about your love of golf.
I fell in love with it. I loved the game of golf. You could get out there. You could start off with 3 strangers. And by the end of the day, you'd come back and you'd have 3 enemies for life. What other sport is there where you can, almost said piss off, everybody that was in the carts with you? Golf is a game that you play, and it's a game that you never win. Now, you might beat the people that are with you, but that little white ball is going to beat you every time you try to hit it. I worked at the game, actually got down to a 4 handicap, didn't last long, played it as much as I could, started a charity tournament that did really well. I really think the tournament, the Bob Hope Classic that I started, was probably the thing that of the giving that I did that I enjoyed the most. Just absolutely loved the game, loved being with the golfers. It was a way to find relief for me. It was just a great thing for me.
In 1995, you teed off in a foursome that included President Gerald Ford, George H.W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. What was that like?
Well, I was pretty old then, so it didn't, I guess I was more numb. Being with 3 major politicians and presidents, having to play with them, being tempted to tell them that they were moving their ball when they shouldn't be, it was quite different. Clinton was very gregarious. George was, I think, still remembering his old CIA days, and I wouldn't have put it past him to have investigated Clinton. Ford was just an all-around good guy, but putting 3 such diverse individuals in a group where you're supposedly having fun was an incredible experience.
That's why you were put in the group, sir. Did you marry Grace Louise Troxel in 1933 and then divorce her in November of 1934?
Yeah, I had met Grace in vaudeville. She was a beautiful woman, great personality. We did marry in 1933, and yes, I did divorce her in 34. She was a good person. Later in life, I would try to slip her some money because I knew that she was having problems making ends meet. I don't think that I should have ever married her at that time. I will take the blame for it.
Okay. Is there anything more that you could tell us about that particular marriage, or you want to let it at that?
Grace was a good person. I wasn't. I think that we'll just let it like that.
Okay. Tell us about Dolores Reed.
I met Dolores Reed and fell in love with her. I stayed with her for the rest of my life. Dolores would be my rock. She would look the other way when I would fumble. She was a wonderful person. We tried to do a lot of good for other people. Later in life, we started to start a foundation. We gave a lot of money to hospitals. We adopted 4 children, 4 beautiful children. She did an incredible job of raising them. Dolores was an absolutely wonderful soul. She still is. Still see her over here. She was one of the most forgiving people I ever met.
Okay. Did you ever formally marry Dolores?
We never formally married. We told people that we did. How else could you be celebrating wedding anniversaries? We decided that it would probably be best if we never went through the formality of marriage. Dolores knew my personality. She knew that there were going to be some very difficult times in her life. But she is truly a wonderful, wonderful person. Okay, let's take a short break here. We will be back in a couple minutes, and we'll have a lot more Bob Hope.
Don't go away. Channeling History will return right after these brief messages.
In order for the light to shine so brightly, the darkness must be present. Tune in every Monday at 10 o'clock. The Dark Sun Rising on the Para-X Radio Network.
Hi, this is Marla Brooks from Stirring the Cauldron. Thursdays are a great night on the Para-X Radio Network. We start off the evening with Journey into the Light, Chapter 3, with your hosts, Psychic Little T and Tabby Cat Gash at 7 p.m. Eastern. Then, on the first and third Thursdays of the month at 8 p.m., it's Tango and Friends, hosted by Bruce Tango. And on the alternate Thursdays at 8 p.m., tune in to Stirring the Cauldron, the Archive podcast. Every week at 9 p.m. Eastern, join me on Stirring the Cauldron Live. And then at 10 p.m., stick around for New Aeon Now with Lily Alley, Davron Michaels, and Christine Matza. Finally, to round out the night, join Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz on the Paranormal Encounters podcast. All this every Thursday, right here on Para-X.
Have you ever wondered what Jesus and his followers would say if you could receive their messages today? In his new book, Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits, channeler and author Barry Strohm answers those questions for you. Using his gift of spirit communication, he brings you messages from such Holy Spirits as Moses, John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Jesus, and even Mother Teresa and the Reverend Billy Graham. They discuss topics that are important for contemporary life in these troubled times. Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers. Signed copies are available on the author's website, spiritspredict.com. After reading this book, you will never again say, "What would Jesus say or do?" Welcome back to Channeling History. Now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Connie, let's go.
Okay, Bob, did you have a 30-year affair with Rosemary Franklin?
Yes, I have to admit I did. Rosemary was a wonderful woman. I felt great affection for her. She was an absolutely gorgeous woman. And we did see each other probably for about 30 years.
How many affairs do you think you had during your lifetime?
Okay, now you're asking a trick question. I did many things during my life that I'm not real proud of, and my many affairs with women is one of them.
Okay, we'll just let it go at that. Who do you consider the love of your life?
Dolores is the love of my life. She put up with me. She raised my children. She was my rock. I do consider her. I had some great affection for Rosemary, there's no doubt. But I do consider Dolores the love of my life.
How do you get along with all these women now that you're all on the other side?
Hey, I'm a funny guy. I get along with them over here. Now, believe me, sex is not something that's a big deal on this side. When you're a spirit, that's the least of your worries.
Correct.
And there's no such thing as spirit Viagra. So you got to just be funny. The women are wonderful. I get along with them. They get along with each other now that they're over here. Hatred isn't a big deal on this side. It's getting along.
Yes, that's what we want on this side, too. This is a very difficult question. Who do you consider the funniest comedian you ever worked with?
As I said, we talked about this earlier. It's a really difficult question. I was honored to work with the greatest comedians that ever lived. Durante. There's just so many. Burns. He would break me up. It is just a very, very difficult question. And I can see Johnny Carson's spirit over here giving me a dirty look. So I better stop trying to answer this thing.
Sorry about that. Tell us about the Rat Pack. Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and Dean Martin.
Now, there were some party dudes. When you followed them around, you might as well wear a seatbelt. They enjoyed each other. They were funny. They would joke with each other. And they were all great talents. The Rat Pack was probably aptly named. They definitely weren't a mouse pack.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm old enough that I remember them. Another one of our questions from the chat room. Who do you spend most of your time with now that you're on the other side?
I spend a lot of time with Dolores. We're still together. I do see all the great ones. Charlie Chaplin, love being with him. He's a real piece of work. I actually get to spend some time with some of the presidents. George Bush. I was very friendly with Dick Nixon in life, and I'm still friendly with him over here. It's like a big party. I see Sinatra. It's just, heaven is very hard to describe. You get to see all your old friends. You get to see people you never knew in life. It's just something really special. It would be really, I love speaking with people. I love speaking with spirits. We still see a lot of each other over here. It's just an amazing place.
So we've heard. What were your political beliefs back when you were in your human body?
I was on the conservative side. I felt that the United States was the greatest nation in the world. I felt that our military was the greatest in the world. I wanted to do as much for my country as I could. I wanted to do as much for the boys in the military that I could. Oh, and girls, I have to bring that in now. Our country was very much at risk in the Second World War. It's very much at risk now with what's going on. Just the players are a little different. I feel that the United States is the greatest country that ever existed. Its Constitution lays a basis that we've been able to follow and understand. There do need to be some changes, there need to be some updates. But I feel that the closer we stay to the Constitution, the better the country's going to be.
Yeah, but do you have a message for our politicians for today?
I'd tell them to cooperate. I'd tell them that they're very happy that I'm not around to tell jokes about them. Politicians need to get along. Throughout the days that I knew all the politicians, and I knew 9 or 10 presidents, they all understood that they had a compromise. There'd be times that Congress would be with them, times it'd be against them. They knew they had to talk. They knew they had to solve issues. They knew, well, I thought they knew, that they needed to not spend more than what they took in. Your government today has to get control of the spending. If they don't, it's going to bury future generations. So there's many things they need to do, and they better start to cooperate to do it.
Excellent advice. Throughout your life, you donated much, like over $1 billion to charity. Will you tell us about your philanthropy?
I always had poor eyesight, so I donated a lot of money towards ophthalmic research. I tried to help people. I gave money to institutions that I thought would help others. I always felt that there were many, many people that needed help. Dolores and I set up a foundation that's dedicated to helping others. We put a lot of money into it. When we sold our properties, the money was to go to the foundation. I did try to help many. I never really made a big deal of it. I didn't try to get credit for it while I was living. I thought that helping others was a responsibility since I had been so lucky in life. I was blessed to make large amounts of money. I was blessed to know some great people. And I was blessed to be able to help others.
Okay, the Bob and Dolores Hope Foundation is still functioning and shows assets at over $50 million. As you're watching from the other side, are you pleased with the way the foundation is functioning?
I would like to see them spend a larger amount for helping others. It's a large foundation now. They have a lot of assets. They do have a fairly sizable staff, but I would like to see them spend more. I think that they're more interested at times in preserving their asset values than they are in helping.
If you were alive today, where would you direct your philanthropic dollars?
I would try to establish a foundation for helping the homeless. I would try to educate them. I would try to teach them that drug use will only end in disaster for them. I would like to try to find jobs for the homeless. There are many out there that really just want to work and raise families and do their thing. I would especially try to find a foundation that would take care of the women on the streets with children that were homeless. They need help the most. It's incredible what has happened to many of your large cities. San Francisco is a septic tank. It's a sewer. The homeless have taken over the great parts of the city. Now, I'm not blaming the homeless. I'm blaming the government that does not help them. I'm blaming the government that allows inflation to drive costs to the point where people can't afford to have homes and have to live on the streets. There are many things that government could do today to help the people that need help. If I was alive, I would take an active role in trying to help those people.
I think you should think about reincarnating. We could use you big time. When you passed, how were you greeted in heaven?
It was an amazing thing. Now, I knew I was preparing to pass. I knew my health had gone. Lord, I was over 100 years old. So it was my time. When I passed and I entered heaven, I was surrounded by all of these great spirits that I knew in life. I recognized them. They were in form. And they were all saying, "Where in the hell have you been, bud? Great to see you. Thought you would never come home." I saw family members that I hadn't seen for many, many years. it was a wonderful time. My guides were there, and they did say, "Bob, we got a few things to talk about," but it was an incredible greeting.
Okay, another question from our chat room. Is there anything that was on your bucket list that you didn't get to do before going home to heaven?
There were things. I would look around, and I would wish that I could have helped more people. I tried the best I could, but as I started losing my health, things just got more difficult. I wish that I had set up more foundations. I wish that I could have done more in that respect. One thing I kind of wished was that I was young again, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. So anyway, I tried, but I think the one thing on my bucket list would be that I wanted to help more people.
You did help pretty many. If you were alive today, who or what would be the biggest target of your jokes?
Oh my God, we are living in a target-rich environment. Your past president, I could have told a lot of jokes about him. I think he tried to do his best, but in many ways, he would have been a target. Oh my God, today, your leader of the House and leader of the Senate, I would have a few jokes about them. I would joke about a lot of things. I would joke about individuals that have all these great amounts of money and don't do a thing to help others. There's actually a lot of things I could joke about if I was alive today. Not sure really who the biggest target would be. There's just so many of them. I mean, you got a lot of senators, you got a lot of congressmen. Oh boy, and think about a couple of your governors hanging out there. That one in California, he's a beauty. I'm glad he wasn't around when I was alive. Well, I guess he was, but he's in diapers. There's just a lot of things that are very serious, but leave you no other alternative but to laugh at them. In many cases, there's not much you can do except laugh.
What were your feelings about God and religion when you walked the earth?
I always thought there was a God. Never got real involved with religion. My parents would go to church, but I got out of the house at 16, 18 years old. I always thought that there were things about religions that were hard to understand and believe. I always wondered why there were so many religions that didn't get along. I couldn't understand why God would allow religions to fight among each other. Religions and God are supposed to be about loving one another. But many religions do not follow the teachings. They do not allow individuals to live good lives. They try to tell them what to do. I never thought that any religion could control whether you went to heaven or not. I always thought it was up to the individual.
That's exactly what God has told us too, so you were correct. Now that you're on the other side, what would you tell our listeners about God and religion?
I would tell them that all religions need to reconcile, get along, and do what is right. I would tell him there's no doubt about a God. I haven't seen him, but I know he's here, and I know that heaven is more real than I ever thought it was. There are many, many things that people should understand. Living a good life and helping others is simply the key to being on the good side when you return here. People that do not believe in a God or a heaven often fear death. I would tell them that that's not too bad. I was ready to go, and when it came, everything went well. I can't imagine what it must be like if you felt that death was the end and you saw death coming. God is real. Religions can be good or bad. And heaven is definite. That's about all I have to say.
It's all very accurate. Tell us about your bout with Rocky Marciano.
He never laid a glove on me. That's because it was a charity event. Rocky's a great person. He did what he could to help others.
Okay, you received over 2,000 awards and honors. What do you consider your greatest honor?
Oh, that's another tough one. I would say at the top of the list, some things are shared. I was given honorary knighthood in Great Britain. I was surprised by that. I was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I was given many, many awards that were just so great. I often wondered why I was getting all of them. In many instances, I'm not sure I deserved some. I was made an honorary member of the military. That was a wonderful time for me because I always loved the military. I would think those are probably the highlights.
Pretty good ones. Looking back, is there anything that you would change about your life?
There were times that I was very intense. There were times that I probably should have been better with others. My history of having affairs, looking back, that was something I should have not done because I know it brought a lot of hurt on Dolores. I would have probably tried to do more for the military. As much as I did, I just loved them. I think that I could have probably worked harder at that. There were some lousy films that I made. I wish I wouldn't have accepted those, but I think that I had a great life. I think I helped a lot of people. But yes, there were many things that I did that I would change.
Okay. In light of the opinions of the woke generation, do you think you could be as successful today as you were in the 30s, 40s, and 50s?
No. They'd be woken all over me. I enjoyed telling jokes that would pick on people, would make them laugh. We used to have these great roasts. They would have parties where they would roast me. I would roast others. I would tell jokes. Today, you have to be really, really careful what you say, or you're going to have social media light up. Keep in mind, in my day, I didn't have to worry about social media. All I had to worry about is booze and throwing tomatoes. But things have changed. People don't have senses of humor anymore. You used to be able to differ with an individual and not irritate them. You could have debates. You could have differences of opinion. Today, if you have a difference of opinion, you're on the verge of World War III with somebody. People got to learn to get along. They got to learn that they have differences. They always will. That is part of human nature. What they need to do is learn that all people need to get along.
Okay, Bob, I've really enjoyed talking with you. Do you have a final message for us?
Yes, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to come through. Actually, I enjoyed it. When they mentioned to me that they would like me to come and talk to the two of you, I thought, who in the hell are Barry and Connie? And then they told me who you were, and I'm really honored to be able to be here. I hope that those of you listening out there will laugh more. Don't take everything so serious. Laughter will make you feel so much better. Help others to laugh. Be kind to others. Do unto them what you would have them do unto you. That's the golden rule. It could be platinum, could be silver, it can be any rule you want it to be, but it's a very good one. If you have any common sense, you'll know that you don't want to show anger because the guy's going to come back, maybe hit you in the mouth, and you ain't going to like that part of it. Be kind. Keep laughing. Love one another. And cooperate. Let people have differences of opinion. Respect their opinions. They may not be right, but respect them. They have their ideas. So thank you very much. I truly appreciate the opportunity. I hope that I could make you laugh a little more. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. So have a good day, and thank you for allowing me to talk.
Thank you, Bob. That was a wonderful message.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. I did enjoy that one, actually. Next week, we're going to be chatting with Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple Computer. He was not a true believer through life, and he was an individual that helped a lot of people, did a lot, great entrepreneur. It's going to be very interesting. You can submit questions or suggestions for future guests through our email, channelinghistoryonparax@gmail.com. My seventh book, My seventh book, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirit, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. You can get it on Kindle for $2.99, and signed copies are only available on my website. Thank you very much for listening to us. Tell your friends about us. Join us next Sundays. Come into the chat room and ask your own questions. We'll be here at 9 o'clock Eastern Time on the Parax Radio Network.
I'd also like to thank you all for joining us this evening. Have a wonderful week. God bless you.
Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode, as we never know who will make an appearance or who will come through the portal. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2020. Our Story Begins by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.